from Indy and then all of the suburbs around it.
I see.
And it's
Pretty big.
done really well. Yeah.
Now everybody has to say. Give that permission to
Awesome.
do that.
All right, as people come in the room, we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the second year of Beyond the Web Salon Series. I'm Angie Raymond, the Director of Data Management and Information Governance at the Ostrom Workshop. The Ostrom Workshop formally began as the Center in Political Theory and Policy Analysis, founded at Indiana University in 1973 by Nobel Prize winning economist Eleanor Lynn Ostrom and her husband, Vincent Ostrom. The Ostroms believed ideas and theories must be considered through the lens of experience, that critical connection is between ideas and what gets done. The workshop today has 5 programs spanning everything from governing the commons to the internet. Today's Salon Series is brought to you by the Program on Data Management and Information Governance. The Data Governance Program seeks to address issues associated with data management and information governance through the exploration and creation of multidisciplinary structures, policies, procedures, processes, and controls the implementation to manage data and information. Our second Beyond the Web Salon Series explores work toward making good on the internet's original promise of personal empowerment, peer-to-peer communication, and social networks based on positive mutual interest rather than algorithmic nudging. Each salon will be led by leaders meeting challenges in each of those areas. The Salon Series meets each month to explore aspects of this highly important topic. Each Salon Series will be held in hybrid format, with the Ostrom Workshop always broadcasting the event. Today's speaker, frankly, needs no introduction, but I have the dubious honor of trying to pull this off. Doc Searls is an American journalist, columnist, author, activist, and widely read blogger. He's the host of Floss Weekly, a free and open source software-themed netcast from the Twit network. That's what I call it, apologies. He's co-author of the Blue Train Manifesto, a business bestseller, author of The Intention Economy, When Customers Take Charge, editor-in-chief of the Linux Journal, a fellow at the Center for Information Technology and Society at the University of California, Santa Barbara, an alumnus fellow of the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, where he still runs Project VRM, and the co-host of the Reality 2.0 podcast. And if that's not enough, he's currently an Ostrom Workshop visiting scholar, so please feel free to join us on campus at any time. And if it's also not enough, he also is the host of Beyond the Web Salon Series. But today, I get to interview the host to kick off year number 2. So, Doc, a question to get us going. You say it's early, yet everyone in college today has only known the internet we have now. Doesn't that make it old already?
No, it's funny. The older I get, the earlier it seems. We live digital lives now. We didn't live digital lives for almost the entirety of human history. All of us are extended by these things. We can't live without them. Marshall McLuhan said that every new technology extends us in some ways. When you're riding a bicycle, those are my tires, that's my handlebars. Your senses extend through these. Our senses are extending outward through digital technology now. Digital tech has really only been with us like for several decades, maybe since the early 70s. The internet in its current form, which is to say with commercial activity on it, really only got going in 1995, and the last of the backbones within the internet, the NSF net, shut down. It was April 30th of 1995. After that, e-commerce exploded, but the internet we're experiencing now, where we, and I'll tip my hat to Bob Frankston on this. I was hoping he'd come on because he was looking for that hat tip. We experience what he calls ambient connectivity. We just presume that these things are going to work anywhere. That's really only 5 years old, if that, where we go anywhere and we now think we're going to be on the net and that being off it is unnatural. It is early. Back in 1995, and if you go back and look up information superhighway, the word information superhighway, and then look for images or covers for information superhighway. Every magazine, when we still had magazines, remember those? Every magazine had a cover story on the information superhighway and what that was going to bring. We have it now, and its lanes are called Apple, Google, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, WhatsApp, the rest of them. We call these platforms, but they're really avenues. And we can jump from one to the other. We can ride in several at once, but we depend utterly on those. I think that's epiphenomenal as well, in more or less the way that the great Victorian business empires run by John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie. Those were the Zuckerbergs and Musk, the Elon Musk to their time. He's still a wannabe to some degree. But anyway, there's legend in his own mind for some reason. Anyway, there's the original promise of the internet. The one that the Berkman Center was founded on to a large degree was one that promised what the internet's protocols supported in the first place, which is peer-to-peer communication between anybody and anything, through any network in between, by a best effort by the routers in between, without any prejudice whatsoever. Now, governments and some companies can sphincter that any way they want, but for the most part, the way the net was designed in the first place, it's got a base protocol, and that base protocol still supports peer-to-peer communication. It supports the formation of commons and so forth. So, and I want to say all that as a way of teeing up that with Project VRM at the Berkman Klein Center, it was the Berkman Center when I started, we started that for the purpose of encouraging the development of tools and services that would make us all independent but better able to engage. We were looking at business because the way we saw it then, business is a lot better off knowing what we actually want than guessing at it. And now we have a multi-trillion-dollar business based on guessing at it that's tracking us like marked animals everywhere we go, violating every possible concept of privacy we had back here in the physical world. But because we're in a digital world now, we've got a new set of norms that are really broken and need fixing. But trying to boil that ocean is really hard. So we've decided to put a small fire under a small cup here in Bloomington, Indiana, to see what we can do. So that's a long-winded answer for that one.
It worked perfect though, because I think what I'm gonna ask you to do is, well, what can the net do that the web can't? Or put another way, what's wrong with the web?
Okay, so think of the internet as this table. You can put anything you want on it. The web is one of those things. Now, what we did with the web is based on a protocol also, HTTP, the hypertext protocol, which, by the way, Tim Berners-Lee did not imagine would be a master-slave relationship between servers and clients. But because we picked up on an architecture called client server, which I have been told is possibly apocryphal, but that it was a synonym or a euphemism rather for slave master. Some of us call us calf cow, where we're always the calves going to the cows of websites for the milk of HTML and cookies. We're stuck in that. That's where the web comes up short. And it's one of the reasons why, for example, we can't imagine that we would have terms that websites could agree to. Why are we always signing their consent notices? We shouldn't have to do that. They should get our consent. We should be able to set the terms that we engage them with. We should be able to have tools of our own to give us better ways to engage. We should have tools of our own for all the stuff that we own, all of our finances, all the rest of those things. Instead, all of those things are served up by the Googles and Apples and Facebooks of the world. And so, for example, given the web we have now, we can't imagine that we should have one way, our way, to control all of our subscriptions. We're in subscription hell right now. You have 5 different, you're on Stars, you're on Netflix, you're on this one and that one. Yesterday, Apple told me I could not subscribe to one app, okay, that I paid last year for, $9.95 for, a maritime one, maritime shipping. Okay, it's a cool app. It's probably worth $9.95. But I went to look on Apple's, on iTunes, which it said to go to. Is there a list of all the things I'm subscribing to through Apple? Not, there isn't one. But because we're stuck on the web as a way of thinking, we're not thinking outside that box. We want to do that.
So then that's a great lead into what are the differences between free and captive customers?
Sure. So if you listen to marketing talk to itself, and I worked in those minds for a long time. I actually was the creative director for the top tech advertising agency in Silicon Valley for the better part of 20 years. And late in the pre-web era, basically up until into the 90s. But when you listen to marketers talk to each other, you and I are targets that they want to acquire and manage and control and lock in. And they speak of this without any sense of irony, but that's the language of ranching and slavery, basically. And that's how marketing tends to look at us. That's how the advertising world tends to look at us. And it's inherently broken. And that too is kind of tied in with the way that the web is working now. And it makes us hard to imagine anything better. So the theory that we have is that, and that we started with the Project Vera at the Berkman Center, which I think shouldn't need probing in the physical world because we do experience it, which is free customers are more valuable than captive ones themselves or anybody else. You get in your car, you can go to the store, you get to the next store, you go to the next store. You have no sense of being captive to any of those because you're picking up a hammer here and some Kleenex there and your prescription there. You can move your prescription from CVS to Rite Aid or to some other one without a whole lot of trouble. You're a free customer. Online, on the net, we're much more captive. And the belief by marketers is that we all have you as accounts. And I owe to Joyce, who's sitting right here over dinner the other night, she said something that she said a number of times before, but I think is really important, which is we exist online as accounts with all these different entities, not as independent beings. And that's great for the companies because they keep track of all these people, but we don't have a way of keeping track of all of them. They should have accounts with us, right? So if we're going to work in a network way.
So this is, of course, leading up to a question that's so important for us at the workshop. What are your plans for the byway?
Okay, so our plans for the byway is to try to prove that theory locally with code, open source code, that supports better signaling between buyers and sellers, starting with buyers, in categories that are not handled by Facebook Marketplace, by Craigslist, or by Amazon. I'm not knocking Amazon at all or any of those things. We like them all, we use them all. It's just that they also hold people captive for that matter. But there's lots of, it'd be much better saying, I need a hammer, who's got it? Then I can go over and buy it this afternoon. I can support a local business. Or I'm looking at collectibles. I'm looking at auto parts. Those are two arcana type things that are kind of popular locally. There are a lot of thrift and antique stores, a lot of garage sales, yard sales. There's a monstrous turnover of property every spring because 40-some thousand students are moving back home or elsewhere. Joyce and I furnished our condo that we moved into here for under $500 for that reason. But we had to look around a lot. If we simply said, I need an end table, I'm looking for a lamp, I'm looking for this or that, and have a system by which people who have those things could easily be notified. This has been thought about a lot. And there are many, many approaches to this. And by the way, I want to tip my hat to a couple of people who are on the call, Kevin Cox in Australia and Bill Wendell in Massachusetts. He's in the real estate world. I saw Marcus Sabadello, he's in Austria, or at least he's based in Austria, all of them doing really clever, good work on this kind of stuff.
What results are you looking for? How are we going to know when we're on the right path?
I want testable results. I mean, this is a research organization. So is the Berkman Center, the Berkman Client Center. We want engagement. We want stuff to happen. I think that's the easiest way of putting it. You want to add to that, Joyce, because she's been far more thinky on this than I've been.
Well, you might want to explain the difference between the byway and the information highway, why we're calling it the byway.
Yeah, okay. So we're calling it the byway because I teed it up too long ago when I talked about the history of the information superhighway. But we want to build a byway around these platforms that are really highways that we jump from one to the other and don't know there's anything outside of. You know, we want to put old Route 66 or old Route 37 back on the map, you know, or old Main Street, really. That's probably a better way of thinking about it. Because that's kind of what happened. We had main streets online or main streets in the world. And along came these bypasses, largely Amazon, you know, routing around that. We want to reactivate those and the communities around them.
So that's gonna be the end of what I wanted to tee up for today, is a conversation that is going to be part of the entire Salon series. Is, you know, how do we recreate some of these connections that historically were so important to us that are pretty quickly being eroded by mass, fill in the blank, mass surveillance, mass, you know, I'm at Target and there is no loyalty from them to us, but we seem at times to feel beholden to them. So I wanted to open it up to questions too. The Salon series is designed to allow people to engage with Doc, not just me. So we had a nice, you know, tee up of getting us started, and I wasn't going to let him get away without talking about the byway, because
Go with Joyce.
you know, for those of you who don't know, Doc and I accidentally met because a million years ago I read, you know, a book that had a dust cover, and walked into a conference, and because the book had a dust cover, I remembered his picture. And I realized who he was at a conference that he was trying to be sort of quiet at. So for those of you who believe in the digital world, I'm officially old enough that I like books and dust covers. That's going to be my plug for the digital world, and you know, some of why it's so important. But we want to tee it up for questions. There are people in the room, for those of you.
The chat
we've
isn't
set
up
up-
there and it went off here, so
we've
just
set up
chat's on.
you know, a camera that is very fixed on us, because it can be a little bit overwhelming if this camera moves around too terrible much, but there are people in the room. And then we can also see the chat, but you're also welcome to unmute and ask questions. You should know
Raise your hand, that's a way.
we are recording. So
Yeah.
if you don't want your you know, big melon to be caught on our YouTube video, then you're welcome to type it in the chat as well, and we'll do our best to protect that.
I also, before we start, want to tip my hat to Timothy Ruff, who I see is here too, who with Joyce has been very active in what's being called the self-sovereign identity, or SSI movement, which he has kind of working on rebranding that as Web 5, which some other people came up with, but I think is a really good way to do that. But this is a really big development community that's grown out of the efforts around this. And the idea there is that our identity, we don't carry IDs with us, we carry verifiable credentials. So if all somebody needs to know is that you're a student here, but not the rest of where you live or your driver's license or anything like that, you just reveal that. I have a ticket to the game. That's called minimum disclosure for constrained use with justifiable parties. So, you know, and adhering to that, it's a whole new way of approaching it. And Timothy's involved in that, as is Joyce. So, conversation.
Questions from the room as well. We're pretty good at this tech, so, and questions from the community as well.
Don't all shout at once.
Comments more than questions.
First off,
Yeah, sure.
I'll comment that here at IU, we have a thing called IU classifieds, which is just what it sounds like. It's totally random. I put a job posting out there for come out and help me rake leaves, and I pay a pretty decent wage, and within hours I have 3 students. So it's pretty active, and it's everything for sale from cars to couches, everything else is
Yeah.
very active.
Originated as a Usenet user group a long time ago.
Really?
So it goes way back.
I'd like to hear how what you're thinking about is different than, say, a nonprofit eBay.
Here's the main difference. It's not centralized. It doesn't require,
No platform.
there's no platform in the middle of it, no single point of failure. It's peer-to-peer. I mean, that's one of our design choices to begin with. The internet underneath it is peer-to-peer. Can we make this thing peer-to-peer, where all you have is a capability in the middle that matches. So You want somebody raking your lawn, somebody else is out there ready to rake a lawn, you get matched up, or you get to look at a list of them. And they're not knowing anything more about you than there's somebody who wants somebody to rake a lawn, but then you can go to email or whatever once the match is made.
All right, one more and then I'll shut up for a while.
Sure.
So earlier I was dissing, before the meeting, dissing blockchain. But when you read the visionaries for these new platforms that use blockchain as sort of a way to fund who's actually doing the work to support the platform kind of thing. Do you see a role for that? And so if this got big and there's some work and some governance involved, is blockchain a possible mechanism? None of my tech friends have any belief in blockchain as useful for anything.
Are you the,
I'll take a very brief.
you should pun it to
As I say,
the room.
So Timothy has his hand up. Yeah, you might be able to answer that better than I can.
Yeah.
But I'll give it a short one, which is a blockchain is a distributed database that is inherently, that doesn't solve everything in every case. There are lots and lots of approaches in addition to blockchain. Blockchain's on the table for lots of things, but it's not the only thing on the table. So you want to,
Marcus, I'm
and
keeping
Marcus
it
is up
to
there too.
those of you who are popping up.
And Marcus is involved in this also. So, yeah. So Marcus, why don't you jump in? And there's Kevin too.
Yeah,
My
thank
peeps.
you. Thank you. I'm just wondering in maybe a bit more concrete way, what do we need to build, right? So the internet is peer-to-peer, and it's like the table, and the web is one of the things that's on the table that ended up being client server. So what else do we need to put on the table besides maybe self-sovereign identity? I think that's one useful piece, but what else is needed, right? What other building blocks should we build and put on that table?
Marcus, why don't you
Yeah,
lay out the things that you think need to be on the table besides identity?
yeah, because you're one of the people putting some stuff on the table, so.
He's the builder.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, identity is one of the building blocks, but that there are a lot of additional things, right? Like generic protocols, intent casting, personal data stores. So some things that are generic enough so that they can be really part of the internet and used for many things, but also concrete enough so that people can actually use it. Right? I wonder what is the web browser equivalent to what we need, and what we need instead of a web browser, something that's peer-to-peer that can I don't know.
So Marcus mentioned intent casting. What I described as the first thing we want to do with the byway is a kind of intent casting. That's where somebody puts out an intent to buy and somebody and other parties respond. It's not the only thing. It is actually the thing that has attracted the most interest and the most conversation, and that's why we're moving forward with it. And we have developers already that have proposed things to us. One is one of the top developers with Solid, which is what Tim Berners-Lee came up with some of his colleagues. But there are, I think, the most important things, and somebody needs to invent this. We're not working on it. One of the most important things is what Joyce has called a dashboard of my own, or a collection of databases of my own that have all my health information from multiple providers, all my financial information from multiple sources, all my property that I might insure should my house burn down or some other thing, my contacts and my calendars. Right now, contacts and calendars are stuck inside of Google and Microsoft and Apple, and they all suck. We need something better that's ours, that works for us. Now that can be, an independent piece of software provided by somebody. Doesn't matter whether it's commercial or not. What does matter is that it's substitutable. In the same way, reason say a spreadsheet or a mail app is substitutable. You can take it and move it from here to there. Nobody has bothered to develop for us. That's the main problem. I think this is a gigantic greenfield, but because we're thinking in a server client way, we always want to build a better server that serves a lot of people exclusively in non-substitutable ways. You know, a Microsoft or an Apple can talk open source all day long, but they don't want you to have the ability to move your calendar from here to there, or your contacts from here to there, or your spreadsheet from here to there, even though you can, but they make it hard on purpose. So I think having control of our information, not data that we sell. I think that there's a mistake that's being made a lot, not so much recently, but in the last few years, that geez, because these big companies are making money with our data, we want to be in on that business. That's a hideous business that's busy screwing us all the time right now. We shouldn't be in on that business. The data that matters most to us is not for sale. You know, information about our property, our health, our finances, and so forth. Those are very private kinds of information. So we need software around that stuff that doesn't exist right now, but there are models for it from the bigs. But after that, you know, Marcus, you've been working on this for years, you know, and it's really hard to get this stuff to catch fire, you know, and it's really hard to get it funded because nobody wants to fund something that really empowers people. They want to fund something that really captures people. That's what you think a unicorn is. So,
Timothy.
yeah, Timothy.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I wish we could turn the volume up a little bit, but I don't know if we can.
Yeah, just a quick point for the gentleman who asked about blockchain. As a person who actually designed a blockchain for self-sovereign identity and spent quite a while and a lot of money and a lot of people and time and effort trying to get the world around it. It was called Sovereign, still is called Sovereign, I guess. But that I have a pretty strong opinion now about blockchain for uses outside of cryptocurrency, and I could be wrong, but my strong opinion now is that blockchain is good for transferring value, transferring money, and maybe for NFTs, if you think NFTs are a thing, and nothing else. When it comes to authenticity of data and all of these cool things that Doc's talking about, those should be enabled with protocols, not platforms. Blockchain technology creates platforms, and that's why there's thousands of blockchains all competing, saying, use me, use me. And when you put your stuff on one blockchain, it's not visible from someone who's using a different blockchain. So it's just a huge interoperability problem, and there's privacy and scalability and cost issues. So, but the larger point I wanted to make is that I believe my question for you, Doc, and I still would like to hear your answer about adoption, and what you think the obstacles are for adoption. But I want to throw out an idea of what I think they are, and I want to hear your reaction to that in addition to what you think they are. What I think the obstacles to adoption are related to trust. The ecosystems, the walled gardens that we use right now for shopping or for interacting on social media or whatever, they have a trust mechanism where we feel safe inside of those walls, and we can interact and interoperate and move around and without too much consequence. But there becomes huge friction when we try to get outside of that. And the great irony is that Congress does want to break up big tech. Congress does want us to have freedom and big tech not to have the huge monopolies they have. So we actually have some powerful allies in the US and around the world. EU is probably even more fervent in their desire to break up the big tech monopolies. But the thing that prevents us from getting out is the trust mechanisms inside of those walled gardens. We don't have a way of exchanging authentic data and creating authentic relationships with each other peer to peer. And without that authenticity, if you and I go to interact peer to peer, how do I know it's really you? And if I try to create, a peer to peer relationship with a school or an entity, and they send me a bill, how do I know it's really them? If I'm not inside of some walled garden that provides all of the trust mechanisms that I know and trust and understand. And so I believe that we've got to create systems and protocols for authentic exchange of data in a peer-to-peer way. And until we can do that, we have to stay where it's inside trusted walls, trusted walled gardens. And I know that's a long, comment, but I want to hear your reaction to that, and also any other thoughts that you have about adoption, obstacles, or progress for all the concepts, beautiful concepts that you've been writing about.
I agree with all of that. Even though I think that there are some giants we trust more than others, I think people tend to trust Apple, they tend to trust Microsoft. To a lesser degree, perhaps they tend to trust Google. Microsoft and Apple are ones that they actually pay. Google is when they don't. You can reach people with Apple especially, and with Microsoft presumably, because I'm not a big customer of theirs. But as for Facebook, I actually got a note I read a few minutes ago from a guy I know who had somebody faking who he was on Facebook. Facebook killed that account and his account and wiped it clean. It's all gone. And he can't get it back, and he doesn't have anybody he can talk to there. So he's not trusting Facebook a whole lot right now. But they've done an amazing job of making things work. I have to say, Facebook fails almost never, and Google fails nearly never. Apple too. They're remarkably well run, and I have no complaint about that. I just think it's early. The main thing that's in the way of adoption is nobody has made the invention of mother's necessity. I remember, I'll tell a story about Joyce here. Like, I once gave a phone to Joyce because I wanted to be able to text with her. I was going to Europe a lot then on my work, and we weren't working together as much because she had her own business. And I wanted to text with her, and I gave her a Nokia phone, and she texted me back the word no, and that was the last thing I heard from her. She took one look at the iPhone when it came out in 2006 and bought one. And she said the same thing she said once. She told me she said this in the 3rd grade to herself, looking at a nun in front of the class, which is, I can work with this, right? That's made her a good student. I wasn't. I can work with this. She looked at the iPhone and said, I could work with this. The iPhone and that design was an invention of mother necessity. You took one look at it and you had to have it. I'll give you another one, electric bikes. Nobody wanted an electric bike until all of a sudden, wait a minute, what's that? I don't have $1,000 laying around. I'm going to buy an electric bike, and now they're everywhere, right? So, we need these inventions that mother necessity. Joyce, go ahead.
Oh, when you're done, I wanted to say something.
Okay.
Okay. What I wanted to say actually is so funny because I'm reading Wendy's chat, and that's what I wanted to say.
I can't read it because I can't see.
Yeah, I was gonna read it to you, but go for it, Joyce.
Yeah, is that is the problem trust or scale? That's like really well put. I would just say that, trust, the one reason we trust big companies is because we've been trained to trust big companies, like Campbell's soup is not going to kill you, right? So that's the mental model we have, is to trust big companies. But the truth is, where do we really learn trust is in small communities, in your family, in your school, in your church, and all that. So that's why we're doing the Byway in Bloomington. We're doing it as a local project for a local economy, because you can trust people that you could drive to their house. And so I think you really put your finger on it, Wendy, by saying, is it scale or trust? Yes, it's trust. But trust comes with manageable human scale. And what we keep talking about past each other is that, the only way to trust is because, you trust the big brands. Well, we've learned to trust the big brands, but underneath it all, as humans, we trust more than just the big brands. Let's go back to that and work with small groups and small, small applications, small desires. I just want to collect my wine information, or I just want to collect. If you start collecting your own information on just one thing, that you don't have to then, I don't want to fill out a personal data store where I have to put in all my information. But if I just am able to collect a little bit of information about different interests that I have in my life, Now I have a collection of stuff that is actually mine and doesn't just live in some silo of a company out there.
I want to add one couple small things to that. One is, there's a serious possibility that we're not going to be able to prove that. We're not going to be able to prove that we can have trust between individual human beings operating in a peer-to-peer way. Not the same kind of trust we can get from the giants. It's possible, but we'll go there. I want to point out that part of what Timothy is working on is what he calls authentic data, and trusting for authentic data and looking at its provenance as well. Where did it come from? And being able to prove that or show that in a way that's trustable but doesn't give away too much personal information. So Kevin.
Thanks, Doc. Yeah, look, this is not a question, but this is possibly a request for people to think about. There's a big revolution going on here in Australia, which is also a little bit behind, but it's the same thing is happening in the United States. What we have here, and it's to do with the electricity network. The electricity network, and this is I think a great opportunity for peer-to-peer, not peer-to-peer, but a great opportunity to work out how to develop our systems that are distributed and that are local and that are the things that this group and your project desires. At the moment, we have a network that is centralised. The whole of the east coast of Australia, everyone pays exactly the same price for electricity. We have central suppliers who give us the electricity and so forth. But what's happened, of course, is that now 30% of houses have their own electricity generators. We have our own solar panels. The system is really creaking. It's really difficult to figure out how to actually change from the centralized model to the decentralized model. And but it's a great opportunity because it's all regulated, and we have to change the regulations in various ways. So we're wrestling at the moment with so one of the things that's needed just now is to have what we call community batteries, or we need batteries. In order to be able to make the decentralized thing work, you've got to start to put storage into the network. One of the things, you can have storage in your own home, you can have batteries in the community, you can have batteries in the wider community, and you can have big batteries for the whole country. How do we now organize ourselves in order to make that system work? So and we're going from a centralized system to a decentralized system, and to put in a battery, a community battery, you've got two ways of doing it. One way is that the community can own it. The other way is that a corporation can provide that service and own the battery, and then give the community that service. So there's the centralized way, of course, is to get businesses to be able to provide that service to you. The other way is for the community to provide the service for itself. So the issue now becomes not so much the battery problem, but becomes a problem of how can a local community, and if you think of the electricity distribution system, you do actually have local communities that are physically connected, what we call behind the transformer. So there's a natural thing here, and what we're discovering is that it's actually quite hard to figure out how that community can work together with a common resource, which is the battery. It's clearly not owned by anyone. It's owned by it's owned by the community. So how do we actually organize ourselves in order to be able to do that?
Well, you've come to the right place.
Governance.
Because that's what the Ostrom Workshop is all about. That's what the works of Eleanor Ostrom were all about. And I think you should talk. You should talk with people here. I should add for others here, by the way, Kevin is the most original thinker on the subject of money and financing things that I know of. Extremely original. He's also an academic. He's a PhD who's been teaching, and he's successful in business as well. And it has the only case I know of an identity project that actually got commercial success. So he's got a great track record. But Kevin, I think this is a great example of something that needs solving. And we're probably going to face the rest of the world soon. So in the meantime, take a look at Eleanor Ostrom's work and see what you think.
We're building on that. We've got. I'll send some stuff through to you as to.
Yeah.
I mean, it works perfectly. And by the way, the different principles and so forth. But the problem arises as to how do you actually convince the people who are currently in charge to allow you to do it.
Always a tough one.
Well, I have one answer to that is that I've always been anti-utility for a variety of reasons. But we have to cut them in on the deal. They have to have a profit motive to participate in this distributed production system, or it will never, the regulations will never change because their lobbying power is too strong. We've got to cut them in on the deal.
Right. So Andy,
Hand up still.
you turn your sound on. There we go.
Yep, just turned my sound on. Thank you. Hi. Well, since this is the first meeting, I just want to kind of step back a little bit and talk briefly about something that's I've been paying attention to or thinking about after all these years. And that is, when the internet started, there was this idea that the end-to-end protocols were going to do a lot of good, right? Because now everybody where it's going to be connected and all this creative potential could be released, and it was just going to be great. But as technologists, we were short-sighted. It was we had the technological protocols, but in terms of the sociological and psychological protocols, we were short-sighted, and we weren't looking at the whole system. We weren't looking at those parts of the system that the technology was going to interact with. And so as we go about talking about building a byway, I think it's worth spending time to look at that, right? Is to think about how the internet was gamed by those that are greedy and those that could see, very, very intelligent people that could see how they could make a lot of money by employing it and using the work that had been done by more altruistic, perhaps, folks. And so I just wonder, in terms of the tools that are necessary for the byway, whether those sorts of things that sort of thinking needs to be in the toolbox as well. And thinking about, once it does exist, how is it potentially going to be gamed, and how do you protect yourself against that?
So I will say, that's me. I'm the one that goes, yeah, this is how I would mess over that happiness of friends all working together. So there is some really good writing on this already, and on sort of the models where individuals intentionally or otherwise just behave like human beings and sabotage things. And I will say that on our next salon series is actually the 17th, which is Nathan Schneider, who might be on here today, by the way. And the colloquium that day is Seth Fry, and the two of them do a lot of stuff with like game theory and those type of things as well. So it's not that all of us don't recognize that, conversation is important, and it is the forefront of our mind frequently when we have these conversations, is to not I guess it's fair to say to not make some of the same mistakes that were made before. This belief that the world is just a happy place and that everyone will get along.
That's
was
part of
probably
it. That's
true.
part of it. That's part of it. But there's this also side as technologists were arrogant to a certain extent. And there's this idea that we have these great protocols, these great technological protocols, that they're going to do all this good. And
Yes.
we just keep on zooming ahead
Yes.
because we think we got a really good thing here.
Yes, I think that's very true. Yes.
It doesn't help, so, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for jumping in on the chat.
Oh, yeah, on the chat, we can't see the chat easily here, and so I just managed to get in again.
Yeah.
So I can see it here, but I'm missing what was said earlier. If anything interesting was said earlier, Joyce recovered some of what Wendy said, but anyway, the early days of the internet in the 90s, up until basically 2006, when Facebook and Twitter took off, we're a utopia of a sort. You know, I owned Searls.com since 1995. It was a server that ran under my desk. I had the Searls.com email that ran under my desk. When we only had really dial-up speed and over a weird wireless connection called Ricochet in the Bay Area, but we were on full time. I had 16 IP addresses. I could put 16 devices on there. That was easy. And there were a choice of ISPs. There were lots of them. I had one called Batnet in Palo Alto. We were in the Bay Area. Later went with one called Concentric in Salt Lake City. All of them got killed off by the phone companies and the cable companies. So, and by regulation and by court decisions and a bunch of other things like that. And I don't know if it was possible to have an enlightened approach way back when. I don't think, if we had a crystal ball then, what would we have done? I don't know. I mean, because I'm not sure we would trade the conveniences that we have now for whatever that utopia might be that we imagined out. John Updike, just quickly, John Updike in one of his books back in the 60s said we live in the age of full convenience. He had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. I mean, we carry slabs in our pockets that connect us to the world at no cost. Wow. You know, so anyway, I don't know that's exactly on.
Maybe I was talking about not having to hunt for food related to stuff.
That's what he meant. right?
Comment in the room, he was talking about not having to hunt for food.
That's great.
I just want to mention one thing about he was talking about ISPs and the proliferation of ISPs. That's actually a piece of the byway vision, is that there'll be a bunch of little businesses that run these matcher networks that can match supply and demand. We want to, break up that it all has to happen on a platform, but not that people can't add value. That's what we want, is the ability for small business people to, help the buying and the selling to happen in the same way that retailers used to. I mean, we still have retail, but retail is shrinking. So we want digital retail, but in the same way that we have it on Main Street, not just only Walmart. So we see that era of all those ISPs, like, can we do that again? But not with ISPs, not with just providing connectivity, which is what ISPs did, but providing goods and services. Why not?
Yeah,
And the
and I'm
question
not
was-
trying to be a naysayer. What I'm saying is that it behooves us to take that larger look at the system, as we're doing the work, that in terms of
Yes, yes.
understanding okay, now if these things do exist, once it becomes popular. For me, it was when I saw a URL on a truck driving by, right? That I realized this internet really. And then a lot of other people noticed those URL things too, and it drew their attention. It was the attention that came, and then they said, "Now, how can I make money off of this?" And
Once
so,
they stop saying www like that.
okay, well, thank you.
We have a question in the room, right? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, she wants to take Christina first.
You're in charge, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Awesome.
you looked at me.
You.
You know where the hands.
That's right, she's.
This. All right. Okay.
So Christina,
Christina?
Hi, thanks. I don't have a webcam, I apologize. I'm building a platform. It's not decentralized in its structure because we found it so hard to build on decentralized technologies. And we're a cooperative, so we're decentralizing, democratizing ownership. And we're also working with our early customers to figure out a data trust, data commons to own the data so that the data would be movable to another provider. And I'm wondering, I really agree with the whoever it was earlier that said we try and solve everything with these tech protocols. And I'm wondering if there's other folks in the room that are seeing hope through the ownership structures and legal structures paired with some of the tech protocols. Thanks.
So I can comment on that. So, I mean, the Salon series is a specific chunk of what we do. But I'm a lawyer, and there's a group of us, for example, at IU that have proposed and are trying to push through the powers that be a data commons. And so we work with a lot of different entities in creating structures that are legally compliant, but data cooperatives, data trusts, all those different things. And that's a different series. But it is something that we very specifically do is how you create those communities of data sharing, and then how you the questions that you might ask once you can identify the problem that you're trying to solve, the questions that you might ask. And if you reach out, I'm happy to get you involved in that community. And again, Nathan and Seth, who are going to be here in October, probably won't talk about that, but they are also here to be part of those conversations that occur right here at the workshop.
That's
Christina
great.
was at DWeb with Seth and Nathan and us.
she's in on all this.
Oh, yeah, so that's us. And
I
we're
just,
all
I
working
kind
on
of,
that.
I guess I'm wanting, I'm aware of, yes, I will reach out, and I love that you're working on that. And I'm also sort of wondering, with the technologists in the room, is there a sort of a minimum full stack that you see where you pair the technology protocols with ownership structures that are not extractive, with financing structures that are not extractive, with data ownership, kind of innovative commons approaches?
I think you might be talking to the wrong audience on this one. I will tell you the IU one has the Luddy people behind it. And so they're the true techie people, and they can tell you how all those different structures, the Luddy school, yeah, sorry, the computer informatics type.
LUDDY.
And they could probably have, probably answer that question much more completely. So we certainly didn't do it just with the lawyers and the governance types. The tech types were in the room, and I would feel bad taking a swing at that and getting it like way wrong. But it's in what we wrote.
Gives a thumbs up, so.
So, but I'm happy to make that connection too, because you're right, that it only works with that, right? It only works if we can find ways to share with potentially some restrictions, or, when do you create a walled garden? When is it just open? That's exactly right. And that comes from the technology, quite honestly.
Thanks.
So Ariana, you're next.
I'm curious about the byway vision. Is it primarily about commerce or also other forms of connection?
It starts with
The
commerce.
vision is everything, but we're trying to narrow it down to one thing that can be accomplished. And we feel like because local economies are constantly looking for a way to increase their touch points within the communities, and there's a natural interest, like the local bakery with the local, buyers, that we feel like starting in commerce. But we also have an affiliation with University of Massachusetts in Amherst. They have a small town instance that they've built on the Mastodon that would be where this could be a generalized conversation tool. And so we're seeing that there's a lot of things that can be extended. We're just trying to do the one thing to get it going. Now you've got your byway, what else can we do with it? So it has a big vision, but we actually had to really pull it down because there's a million things you could do once it exists, but we have to get it into existence first. Thanks for the question.
Okay, everyone, so I'm going to do the obligatory. We keep these to an hour for two reasons. One is scheduling, but the other one is at the Ostrom workshop, we work really hard to allow postgraduate and graduate students to have the opportunity to ask questions. And sometimes, quite honestly, they don't want them recorded and put on YouTube for all prosperity. So what we're gonna do right now is, because we're at the top of the hour, I'd again like to thank Doc Searls for this wonderful meeting.
Don't go away.
But we're not leaving. We're going to continue the conversation. We're just gonna give people who might otherwise not be brave enough to ask this on a recording the opportunity to engage as well. So the next salon series is October 17th, as I've already said, when Doc hosts Nathan Schneider. Don't forget registrations at the workshop, or join us in person. I see a couple IU types on here. We're a short walk away. So come on over. There's actually a group here that I'm sure will be here for a while. We're going to shut off the recording now, but again, that's not intended to be the end of the conversation. We hope everyone will stay around, but if you can't, thank you for joining the Salon series, and we'll see you again on October 17th.
Okay, so